All right, Uncle Sam FM here, and we are looking at episode 3 of my Dynasty Builder Save, where I am looking to build my clubs into dynasties. And starting with the Houston Dynamo, and this is episode 3, where I'm going to be discussing transfer policy and then my preseason setup. So, transfer policy, let me start. I'll have to start with some background work, right? So, first of all, it really goes back, my personal transfer policy goes back to a baseball team known as the Oakland A's. They're a Major League Baseball club, and they are what we call a small market club. And from there, we have, well, in the early or late 90s, early 2000s, you had Moneyball develop in Oakland. And to kind of set it up, the Oakland A's, as we said, are a small market club. Now, what does that mean? Well, obviously in baseball and American sports in general, you don't really have, especially in the professional sports, you don't have promotion relegation. So you have the same teams in the professional leagues every season, barring expansion. But Oakland in Major League Baseball is one of the smaller market teams. That means the city that they're based in, which is Oakland, slightly kind of San Francisco, although you've got the Giants in San Francisco. So the Oakland market is relatively small when compared to the rest of the league. They don't have as much, obviously there are fewer fans, attendance is lower. You also have their television market is smaller. They have fewer resources than the rest of the league. They don't have as much money. So when they get a player who's really, really good, that player, as soon as he can, is going to leave to sign with another team who can pay him a higher salary. And so Oakland struggles with matching contracts, matching salaries. And their general manager was a man named Billy Beane. And this situation became frustrating for him. And so he started looking for less traditional ways to compete. His club was, the A's were simply not as competitive as he wanted to be when it came to signing players. And so he hires a man named Brian De Podesta. And they started using what we call in baseball sabermetrics, which I'm not going to go too far into detail, but in baseball, there are certain statistics that people look at. So they look at batting average, they look at home runs, and they'll base how, the contracts that they give to players on those statistics. So Bean and DePodesta started looking at other statistics that that are more revealing of how valuable a player is. They were kind of forced into looking for these other hidden statistics to get guys to build a squad, build a roster that is cheaper than some of your more successful teams, right? Because teams like the Yankees, they just go and they sign the guys. They've got the most money, so they can give big, fat contracts to the players who have the highest batting average, have the most home runs. And so Dave Podesta and Billy Beane started using sabermetrics to find cheaper players, whose was things like your on-base percentage, slugging percentage, statistics that people don't usually look for. And so they were able to remarkably make the playoffs with a salary, a payroll that was about 1/3 of the bigger teams in the league. In 2002, their salary was $44 million, whereas the Yankees, who had the highest salary, was $125 million. And the Oakland A's salary ranked 28th in the league out of 30 teams, which obviously that's very low, but they still made the playoffs. And he built a relatively consistent winner with a very, very small payroll. And so in 2004, Michael Lewis wrote a book called Moneyball and kind of went through how they were able to compete, how Bean De Podesta were able to win with a smaller salary without being able to sign the big name guys. And so clubs in other leagues, in other sports, started trying to mimic that. How can we do what Bean and De Podesta did? Because the reality is, in American sports, the larger market teams have more money. Now, in the National Football League, you have a salary cap, which kind of protects you, whereas in Major League Baseball, you don't have a salary cap. Even the one they've since put one in, but you can still sort of exceed that cap. And so, but you still have clubs that look how to replicate Moneyball in their sport. And actually, Brian De Podesta now, he works for the Cleveland Browns, which is a American football team. And so that would eventually lead to a book called Soccernomics, written by Simon Cooper and Stefan Szymanski, published by Nation Books. And there is now a 2018 World Cup edition. And the full title is Soccernomics: Why England Loses, Why Germany, Spain, and France Win, and Why One Day Japan, Iraq, and the United States will become kings of the world's most popular sport. Obviously, the last part, Japan, Iraq, and the United States, that seems far-fetched. They base it on certain economic principles, trends. Obviously, football goes well beyond that. It goes well beyond economics. There's a lot of contributing factors in the development of a sport within a country, right? And the United States has a lot of hurdles to overcome, and may never, as far as joining the elite. The United States may never become Spain, may never become Germany, may never win a World Cup, even though they've got the strongest economy in the world. Even if they remain the strongest economy in the world for whatever centuries, it may be that they never join the elite in football. But this book is a very fascinating look at economics in soccer. And so I think there's value in it when you look at developing a philosophy in Football Manager, and I sort of have. And what it kind of looks at, to sort of set this up, is it looks at how clubs like Oakland, like the Oakland A's, with few resources, how they're able to compete. And it's the main club that it kind of evaluates is not PSG, Olympique Lyon, as they're not based in a huge giant metropolis city. Relatively speaking, it's a smaller city, and yet they're able to compete. And as a matter of fact, they dominated French football for a good 12 years. They won the league almost every year. It really wasn't until PSG started just absolutely spending astronomically that they were able to overtake Lyon. But it looks at the principles that Lyon operated by in the transfer market, and it shows you how they were able to build a consistent winner in the transfer market without going and signing the Neymars, without signing the Suarez's, so on and so forth. And so what I've done is I'm going to list the 12, and all these 12 secrets are straight from Soccernomics. I would recommend it. It is an interesting read. It's a fun read, but also, might help you in your Football Manager transfer policy. And my goal here is to build a dynasty, right? I want to build a dynasty like Barcelona when it comes to style of play, player development. But I would also like to implement the policies that made PSG, I'm sorry, I keep saying PSG, Olympique Lyon a dynasty. And so I want to mesh those two and how I operate. And so these are the 12 main secrets. First of all, a new manager wastes money on transfers. Don't let him. So I'm not going to step in and empty the transfer budget. The transfers that I do bring in are going to be, they're not going to be big name guys. I'm not going to go make huge purchases because that's something that Lyon didn't let their manager do. And so I'm going to try and follow that as well. Also, Lyon uses the wisdom of the crowds. They have a committee that discusses each transfer. They don't just let one man say, hey, this is who we're buying. They discuss all their transfers and crowdsource, right? Because you get a lot of different perspectives. That's a little harder to recreate in FM. I use my scouts and my data analysts to sort of justify my transfers rather than just getting the guys that I think that I want. So it's it's not impossible to create, but it is more difficult. Stars of recent World Cups or European Championships are overvalued. Ignore them, which that's relatively true, right? Sometimes we look at, oh, this guy scored a hat trick in the World Cup final. He must be somebody I need to go sign. Don't do that, right? Because that's one tournament, might even be one match. So avoid overvaluing guys who had good international competitions. Also, one of the secrets is that certain nationalities are overvalued. In FM, that's not necessarily true. It might be our own we might personally overvalue a nationality when we're evaluating a specific player versus another player. So, for example, I might be looking to sign a center back, and because I have this sort of personal bias towards Brazilian players, it might cause me to sign a Brazilian over somebody from, say, Honduras, right? But it could be that player from Honduras might be better, and if I was careful about it, I wouldn't evaluate based on nationality. But we kind of have a tendency to do that, so it's something to think about. Just because a guy's Brazilian doesn't mean he's going to be better than a player from Cape Verde or something. Older players are overvalued, and it goes without saying. So you don't really need to evaluate that any further, right? That's a pretty common error, that we tend to look at older players based on name recognition, and so, but they're overvalued. Center forwards are overvalued, right? Strictly because of the goals. Right? You might be the worst player might be the center striker for the worst team in the league, but somebody's got to score their goals though. And so because he's the last guy to touch it before it crosses the line, he'll accrue a high goal scoring rate, and so his value is a little higher than it should be. Goalkeepers are undervalued. This one not as true at FM, but it's still something to consider. Meaning, a lot of times it'll be easier to get a good quality goalkeeper just because they're undervalued. But we'll come back to that in a second. All right, identify and abandon site-based prejudice. Gentlemen prefer blondes is the phrase that the Soccernomics authors use. The idea is that if you're a scout and you're watching a game, you got 22 guys on the field. If one guy has blonde hair, it might cause him to stand out, and so you'll focus on him a little more and maybe rate him a little higher than you should. And that might be true in real life. Scouts probably do that, but in FM, that's not going to be as big a problem. The best time to buy players is his early 20s. Obviously, when he starts getting into his mid to late 20s, he's in or past his prime. So, you don't want to buy him then. And then on the other side, when a player is 16, 17, you're not able to track his development. And so you don't know if he is, it's harder to tell if he's going to be able to achieve his potential. Right, but by the time he's in his early 20s, you've got something to track. You've got progress to see where he was compared to where he is now, and if obviously he's developed well, then odds are he is going to come closer to achieving his potential. But whereas younger guys, 17, 18, it's kind of a crapshoot. Sell any player when another club offers more than he is worth. Right? Anytime a club comes in ready to buy a player, hey, sell him on if it's for more than what your personal value is. Right? If you have a guy valued at $2 million and somebody comes in with a $5 million offer, then you sell him. Forget about your own personal feelings about that player, which can be difficult. Right? When you sign a guy and you develop him, man, he's scoring goals. You love this kid. But then when somebody comes in, it's hard to sell him. But if you don't, there's no guarantee that you're going to be able to match that offer in the future. Maybe he stops improving, he stops developing, or maybe he gets an injury, he has a setback. Maybe you have another player develop and actually become better and push him to the bench. And that means that you're not going to be able to get what you want out of that guy. So to avoid those scenarios, Leon would sell a guy as soon as an offer came in that matched or exceeded their value. Replace your best players before you sell them. That's just smart, right? If you're gonna if you're going to sell your center forward, you better have somebody to step in to replace him. Buy players with personal problems and then help them deal with their problems. In Football Manager, you can accomplish this through tutoring, right? If you have good, strong leaders and older players with high, what you would call hidden attributes of, your more professional guys, they can tutor a guy who has maybe lower professionalism. And the truth is that because if a guy is an attitude problem, then you might be able to get him cheaper. Just because clubs want to get rid of these guys, they become locker room cancers, and so you're able to get them at well below their value, and then you work with them, help them, improve you tutor them so that they no longer have those personal issues, and then you sell them for well more than you paid for them. And obviously you get production out of them, before you sell them, and then help your players relocate. When you sign a player in an FM, there's a hidden attribute. I think it's called adaptability. Sometimes guys have lower adaptability ratings, so obviously when you first sign a player, you can have your captain welcome him to the club, help him to adapt. But then also in the way you interact with him will help him kind of become comfortable at the club. You also, if he doesn't speak the language, you send him on a language course. You help him learn the language. So that's something that is fairly achievable at FM. So the main of these 12, the main secrets that I use in my transfer policy in FM, older players are overvalued. I don't go sign older guys. I try not to sign anybody older than 24. Really 23, because I feel like 23 is kind of the cutoff. I'll sometimes sign a guy who's 23, but I try to keep it at 22 to 18. Center forwards are overvalued. I try not to go and sign center forwards from overseas. When I'm playing as an MLS team, like with Houston right now, I'm going to draft my center forwards, or I'm going to sign them from my academy. I'm probably not going to bring any in. One thing I might do is I'll bring in a winger who I can retrain as a center striker, or maybe I'll sign an attacking midfielder that I can train as a center striker. And then I'll be able to sell them for a lot more than I paid for them. The best time to buy players is early 20s. As I mentioned, I try to 18 to 22 is the ages that I really look at when it comes to signing young players. Obviously, at the draft, everybody's in their early 20s in the MLS Super Draft. I sell any player when another club offers more than he is worth. I would also add to this more than he is worth, or more than what I paid for him. I don't want to lose money. Like if I sign a player, let's say I go and sign a transfer for $2.5 million. So when I buy him, though, his value is only $1 million. If a club comes in and wants to give me $2 million for him, well, I'm not going to make that sell. Even though it's double his value, I paid $2.5 million. So I'm going to make sure that I get more than I paid and more than he's worth. And then I also look to replace my best players before I sell them, right? That's just smart. I mean, you're always looking to build your depth. So I want the guys, and because I'm not signing older players, everybody I have is going to be either contributing or they're going to be developing. So my second 11 and then even below my second 11, those are guys I'm developing so that I can replace my first 11 after I sell them. So that's my basic transfer policy, right? That's my rules that's my philosophy on how to build my squad, build my roster in FM. Again, this is me trying to combine the philosophies that built Lyon into the dominant club in France with my building my Barcelona type club, my identity. And so next would be how I operate in the preseason. The purpose, obviously, you're always looking to, in preseason, you're looking to build player fitness, get them ready for the season ahead. You want to improve their morale, get everybody excited, get everybody positive morale, looking ahead, looking positively toward the season. Also, you want to make sure that they're familiar with your style of play. And then fourth tier purpose, looking to strengthen the club brand. You can do this through friendlies against Well, I tour, and we'll look at that in a moment. I'll send my guys on a tour. Maybe I'll try to find a high reputation foreign club to get a friendly against, to help get for right now the Dynamo brand out there. I want my brand to go. I want my club to be recognizable beyond just the United States, but I want fans to recognize my club in other countries, like some of the biggest clubs in the world are. Everybody knows Barcelona. Everybody knows Manchester United. Manchester City is now a club that everybody in the world knows. I want the Dynamo to be like that. So here's how I do my friendly schedule. I first set up an international tour. We're through one of these countries, right? Brazil, obviously, Japan, China, Korea, Sweden, Norway. These countries, all their calendars fit, so I can send a tour into a country without really having to worry about that friendly being canceled. Because generally my preseason falls into the preseason of all of these other countries, so they're willing to schedule tours with me, and while they're also not really, you don't have to worry about some competition taking away that match, right? So I don't have to worry about losing that friendly to the Swedish Cup or so on. And Brazil is a place where there's economic advantages to being recognized in Brazil, but it's also where I'm looking to get some of my players. So I want to get my club brand out there. Japan, China, Korea, those are Asian countries, so that does help the club merchandising and so on to become recognized there. And then obviously Sweden, Norway. Scandinavia is a place that I eventually will be scouting. They develop some players capable of playing in MLS, so that is a place that I want to get my club brand, and it also kind of fits with my touring schedule. Again, I'm not just trying to expand my brand by touring. I'm looking at building fitness as well. So that's usually how I start my preseason. Then I'll set up 6 to 8 friendlies against weaker teams. I'm trying to improve my morale. Maybe 1 or 2 against foreign clubs with a high reputation. And in the United States, you've got preseason exhibition tournaments in my custom database file that lets you play in those. It does, even if you don't use my database file, you can set up, and if I'm not using my file, or if I'm in a country obviously where I'm not playing the exhibition tournament, I'll set up my own cup, right? I'll set up a preseason cup where it's either it's a round robin deal or a semifinal one-off semifinal final setup. So that's the general rules. We'll look at how in my current game it's actually set up. As you see, I've got a tour of Brazil to start the season, January 7th. I'm playing Remo, then Bangu, then Nautico, and then Capital. Those are my 4 tour matches in Brazil. Then I've got, I think, 5 preseason games with Memphis, Jacksonville, Brazos Valley, San Jose, Inter Miami, before I go into the Disney Pro Soccer Classic, which is a fun little preseason cup. It's one of the better ones in my custom database file. You play every team in your group once, and if you win the group, you go to the championship, where you'll play the winner of the other group. If you finish second, you'll play for third against the second place finisher from the other group, and so on. So you're guaranteed 4 matches, and they're relatively close together, so you can kind of rotate your guys. It's good for building fitness. That's the main goal. Obviously, you want to win every competition you're in, but you also have a potential for a highly competitive match, as it does bring in one team from Brazil, and this year it's bringing in Fluminense, who is a high quality club from Brazil. So hopefully I can win my group and face Fluminense in the final. But the real goal there obviously is fitness. And after the Disney Pro Soccer Classic, I'll play an amateur team, the ASC New Stars, a local team from Houston. And then I will play my USL affiliate, the Rio Grande Valley Toros. So that's a look at how my schedule actually is set up. And I don't remember if I have... Yeah. So, and the way I work on my guys' fitness is the first, in my first 4 friendlies, in matches 1 and 3, the first 11 plays the first half, second 11 plays the second half. So each guys get a half, or each of my first 22, they'll get a half. They'll get 45 minutes. Second and fourth match is the same, except for I'm flipping it, right? So the first match, the first 11 starts. The second match, the second 11 starts. So in those first 4 matches, my first 22 guys are each getting a half of play. They're getting their legs stretched, getting ready for the season. And then for the friendlies that I have left, they'll play the full 90. So the first 11 will play 90 in the next friendly, and the friendly after that, my second 11 will play the full 90. And they'll really start, getting their fitness up as they, prepare for the season ahead. So that is how my transfer policy works. That's my transfer philosophy. That is how, and it's also how I do my preseason as I get ready. As we head into the, my next video, I'll probably pick up at the Disney Pro Soccer Classic, whichever I qualify for. So if I win my group, we'll watch the championship game. If I finish second, we'll watch the third place game, so on and so forth. But if you have any suggestions, maybe expound upon what I do. Maybe you've got some ideas on my transfer policy. Maybe you do the same. If you have any suggestions, comments in general, please post them. Let me know. If you have any recommendations, any criticisms, please post them. I'm always looking to do things better, and that might mean I have to read some criticism, and that's okay. So if you have anything like that, please post it. But this is Uncle Sam FM signing off.